So, as the reader, have you ever read a novel and the characters just fall flat and you just realize you don't care about whether this character gets what they want, or it's just maybe unclear, what are they? Do they want? Who are they? Well, we're going to talk about that today with Eddie Jones here on Reality Coaching for Writers, where we offer no fluff.
Only the real stuff.
That's right. So welcome to today. Eddie, do you want to kick off this discussion? You're the fiction writer.
Well, yeah, so right before we came on, I was saying that there's a lot to go into character development. So we're going to kind of high spot it or just maybe introduce the concept today. And there are 5 things that when I'm coaching authors, and I have to speak to myself about this because character development is one of the things in my fiction that I often don't do well, because I'm so plot driven and dialogue driven and humor driven and action driven and all this other stuff. And because I'm writing for middle grade boys, our character development is really short anyway. Boys are guys, we're not like women. So it's one of the areas that I kind of always need to improve. I can always improve in character development. So I know the information. It's just a matter of applying it. But there are 5 things that when I coach writers that I encourage them to do. And the first one is to reveal heart, to reveal the heart of the character. And I'll stop with that one right now, because that's really one that it doesn't just apply to character development in fiction. It applies to all of us. If you think about a speaker, and this is one of the reasons why you've always heard that cliche, nobody cares what you know until they know that you care, right? That's a revealing of our heart. Until we care about somebody, we really can't communicate any information that they're going to receive, because if there's not that connection. And that's what happens when you and I are doing right now. This is us getting ready to be very transparent and reveal our heart.
Right.
And in doing that, the listeners and our audience is going to either relate to us or not. And so early on in the story, when you introduce your character, always start with revealing something about their heart. There's a technique that we talk about this in the book Save the Cat by Blake Snyder, and I'll just quickly summarize it. It's you've got a tough cop guy. He's got some bad guy pinned behind a wall, and they're going to exchange gunfire. The death is in the air, and there's this cat in the middle of the 2 areas, that once the bullets start flying, the cat's going to probably get killed, right? And you have this tough guy run out and save the cat from wherever it is and bring it back behind a safe place. And then he goes about shooting the bad guy. That's the concept of Save the Cat, which is you have to reveal the heart.
Showing the heart.
Tough guy.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, that's good. Yeah. I like that. And I think that's a great hook right away. It's a good way to hook the reader into realizing, wanting to know more. Like, here's a tough guy, but he has this heart to want to save the cat. I want to get to know that character more.
Yeah, I mean, because one of the reasons it's so important to reveal that heart early is, and it doesn't just have to be empathetic like that. It can be all kinds of things. It's the reason that when Cindy and I talk about writing devotions, it's always right from the wound. That's you revealing your heart. It's because in doing that, the reader then becomes interested and curious as to why that is so important. Saving that cat is so important to the tough guy. Why does he care? Right. So now you've got a curiosity built in, and they want to know a little bit more about the character. And that's why it's so important to reveal that heart early, because then we're always asking, but how come? What's the motivation? Where was she wounded? And why does she behave this way? That's revealing heart. The second thing,
number 2.
Yeah, the second thing after you reveal heart, you have to introduce obstacles. So that's almost
Mm,
like a plot thing, but it's early in the story. We've said this before. Nobody likes characters that get everything because
right.
too often we don't get any of the things that we want, or we get very few of the things that we dream of, right? So we really kind of get ticked off when we have
Yeah,
a character go,
I do.
oh yeah, 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 I don't like her, I don't like him. So you have to have obstacles that stand in the way of your character. And then the third thing is you have to pick a path, and we've talked about this a little bit before, but whenever there's an obstacle, you have to present paths around the obstacle. You can either try to go over the wall. It's pretty high. I don't have a ladder. I don't see a rope. I can't jump that high, right? That's a path if you could get over the wall. Is there any way to go around the wall? No. There's water on one side and molten lava on the other. I can't do that. And I fly, right? So you're always presenting paths for your character, and probably the one that's going to be uh, the hardest to accomplish and the least accessible to your character is the one you want to make them pick, right? The one that's
When you
just
what?
the
When you,
least accessible. Like I'm looking this way. I got molten lava over here. I got a rushing river over here, and I got a wall I can't jump over. Which one is going to be the hardest to get to? I go, well, the rushing river is going over a waterfall. There's no way I'll do that. The molten lava, it's not. I mean, it's hot, yeah, but it's a short distance. I guess I'll go with the molten lava, which is totally practical, right? But you go, okay, that's the one I'll go with, right? So that's what you're trying to do with pick a path. You're trying to make that option really impossible, but that's really the only option left. That's what picking the path is.
so I have a
And we see
question.
this in Rome.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I have a question for you. So, um, where do you introduce what the protagonist wants, the desire of the protagonist? Would it be after this obstacle? Do we see them striving for something and then we get the reason for it? Where do you introduce the reason they're willing to go over the lava and mount this obstacle? Is it before or after?
Well, in my experience in romance, watching Hallmark movies and looking at romance proposals and reading romance first chapters, it's usually in the revealing of the heart, um, because that's what's going to motivate you. And if we think about it, really, it's the heart that motivates much of what we do. Yeah, so let's pick up from there. I'll clip this part out. So based on what I was saying about reveal the heart, face obstacles, pick paths, and make a discovery, and then finally reveal a secret. In Diana, in your experience from looking at proposals and manuscripts and books that you've worked on, how does any of this resonate with what you've read or seen?
Oh yeah, I mean, when I can see what's at stake for the main character, and then I find myself cheering them on. Um, the revealing a secret, that's interesting because, like you used the example of the Hallmark movie. I mean, the secret's obvious to us as watchers, but it's like a dawning with the character that they're with the wrong guy. Would that be the secret? It's
Well,
and
they're going to be. That's always going to be one of the secrets. But oftentimes, in at least in the films, the secrets are sins. They
mm,
are uh, they are things. And when I say a sin, I mean it doesn't. Well, in Scripture they call it a sin. If it's against your spirit, then you have sinned against your spirit, which means basically you're sinning against God because in your mind you're thinking, "Ooh, God wouldn't want me to do that." Well, if that's what you think and you do it anyway, then that's a sin,
right,
right? Because
yeah, you're not being true to
you
yourself.
think yeah, and you think the Father probably wouldn't be happy with it, but you do it anyway. So that's still a sin. So that's what happens a lot of times in the secrets, is that the character does something that they, in their spirit, feels like it's not right, and they do it anyway, and that's revealed. It comes out that they've done this one thing that they shouldn't have done. fathered an illegitimate child, 10 years ago, that kind of thing. They put it past themselves, nobody knew about it, but it's going to come out in the story as something that's going to be a huge deal, right? That kind of thing. That's what revealing a secret. And if you, like I said, it's if you did that in every scene, you're going to keep the reader going forward because they want to keep seeing what else, what other layers, perfections does the character have to know about.
So, like the tough guy that saves the cat, the motivation to go over the obstacles is fueled by some secret.
Sure. Yeah.
Right.
And we can just make it up, and let's just say that this guy, let's call him Clint Eastwood, because I think that's where it probably came from when Blake Snyder was doing it. He was using Magnum Force and Dirty Harry is, I think, part of what he was the example. But let's just say that a cat for Dirty Harry became a symbol of the loss of his mother, because his mother always loved cats, always had a cat around for as long as he could remember. His mom was saving strays and bringing them in the house from a small child. Dirty Harry had cats around him all the time. That's one of the reasons they called him Dirty Harry when he was growing up. It's because they always had, cat pee on him and stuff like that. His clothes smell like cat pee because of pee. I'm making this up. So, that could have been it. And he got into law enforcement, and, because he was a tough guy, he was trying to prove that he wasn't a little kid that liked to hang around with cats all the time. But he's got a soft spot in his heart for cats, because when he sees a cat, his mind instantly goes back to his mom, and willing to almost die to get killed to save the cat. And that could be his secret that you don't find out till very late in the episode, in the movie.
Well, and that brings up a good question as far as we hear a lot about deep point of view. And from agenting perspective, I was always told, boy, the publishers are not looking for literary novels any longer, like Jane Eyre with heavy description, but they were interested. So the reaction then from the writer was to write these novels without substance, because they cut the heavy description, they cut a lot of the heart out of the novel in an effort to not write literary. So now, the publishers then had to come back and say, we want deep point of view. We want to get in the character's head so that we understand their motives for why are they behaving the way they're doing, and why do they respond in that way. And so that's another, aspect when we're looking at your 5 points here.
Yeah, the deep point of view, I'll be honest, I've never understood that concept anyway. And perhaps it's because I write in first person point of view. So when I write, I'm basically writing about myself. I don't think I can get any deeper than myself. So it's never really made a lot of sense to me. And I'm also one of the ones that breaks the rule a lot. What I call the Ron Benray rule, which is don't take the reader out of the fictional story. Don't break that bubble that the reader's in. Yeah. Because I do in my own writing, I speak directly to the writer. I mean, to the reader. And in other words, I'll say, I was pretty sure that, but then because you've already seen what she'd said to me earlier. That's me speaking directly to the reader, right? Which would take them out of the fictional bubble, because suddenly they're going, wait a minute, I thought we were in a story. Now, wait a minute. It's like the producer, the director coming around the camera and looking into the lens and speaking to the audience. That doesn't happen. But I do that. But I do it because deep point of view. It is my point of view, and it's so deep that I'm really trying to get on a level where I'm speaking directly to the reader. And like we both know this is just a made up story, but go along with me and help me with this, that kind of thing. I'm like you though, the literary part, I mean, and then we're a little bit down a rabbit trail, but I mean, I don't read a lot of his work, but Pat Conroy, when he writes, it's poetry. His prose is poetry. And Claire Fullerton, her prose is poetry to me. She's an LPC author, or was, and she's just got a gift. We talked about this, Eva and I talked about this before. Claire just has a gift for stringing words together that I don't think I'll ever have, and don't even want to have, because I think it would mess up what I'm trying to do. That's deep point of view though, because it does reveal heart. It's revealing heart. Now, if you're just painting landscapes, that's a different deal. But if you're painting the character, that's deep point of view.
Right. And so how important is dialogue in this? Because, they call it head hopping. If you go from one character's mind in one scene, you have two characters, you're trying to keep straight. They call it head hopping. But to guard against that, they say each scene should stay with one character. But if you want to let your reader know something about your character, dialogue can often be the best way to do that, right?
Right. Yeah, and that's another one of those things in the Christian publishing industry, because head hopping isn't accepted in Christian publishing, but it's accepted everywhere else. Right. We call it omniscient point of view.
Right.
That's what.
Yeah.
And I've always assumed that the reason it wasn't allowed in the Christian publishing, is because their attitude apparently was nobody can be God but God, so don't do that. And therefore they call it head hopping. But you go read general market fiction, omniscient point of view, being in two heads at once, that's acceptable.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing is, I think the general market assumes the readers are more mature enough to keep track.
Yeah.
They don't have to have a jersey with a name and a number on the back to know who's thinking and right and saying it. In the Christian market, apparently we think our people aren't smart enough to keep track, I guess. Anyway.
Well, it has to be done well. And
yeah,
I have read so many general market authors that do it so well that you just, if it's written well, you hop right with them. And like you said, you keep track. You're right with them. You don't lose any. You don't have to go back and reread and familiarize. You just go along with the story, and it works. And I know a couple contracts I sold to publishers. They told me, Diana, they're making me fix the head hopping.
Yeah, and there are tricks you can do with it. That, I mean, again, this is the Ron Denray rule that you just have to add enough clues in the dialogue to let the reader know who's speaking and whose head you're really in. And there are ways to do that. There are attempts. If you were the main character in this scene that you and I are going through right now, and I was the secondary character, and in theory not supposed to be in my head, then you would say, Eddie, it looks to me like you're thinking, I don't know what I'm talking about. Is that what you're thinking? Right? And so now I go, well, I wasn't, it's just and that reinforces really whose head we're in, which is yours. But you reveal some of my thoughts in exposing that. And it's not that difficult to do. And if the publisher tells you not to head hop, don't head hop.
Yeah.
But
exactly.
to your point, staying in deep point of view with your character, revealing their heart, their thoughts, what's going on inside them, that's key. I mean, that's how you're going to keep the reader deep in their point of view and deep in their heart. The other thing we haven't even talked about yet, and it's not even in my notes, it's just something I was dwelling on before we came on, is early in the story, you want to show where a new spirit arises for your character. A new spirit arises for your character. Because we don't really talk about that, but that when you're talking about heart, a lot of times what you're talking about is being inspired. inspired, right? So now you've got a new spirit that has come within you. And that changes your perspective on life, on your future, on the people around you, on your circumstances, on your hope. And when you're writing in Act 1, you need to find some place for that spirit to be introduced to your character. And it may be in the call to action area, but you want to see them see that spirit, and their spirit kind of is drawn to it and goes, yes, yes, I want to be aligned with that spirit. I'm going to take that spirit in. And in doing that, your character right then changes. They become different than what they were at the beginning, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I've been looking at this book here, Robert McKee's story. It's substance, structure, style, and the principles of screenwriting. But he was talking about the substance of a story with the protagonist, and he put it this way. He said, a protagonist is a willful character. And the quality of will is important. In other words, they have to have less than the willpower of Job, but powerful enough to sustain desire through conflict and ultimately take actions that create meaningful and irreversible change. So I think that's what you were saying about with this spirit, is there's going to be a change in your character, their pursuit of their desire, overcoming every obstacle helps change our character in the way that we face it, and there's the inner strength that comes to us. And so this character is going to grow as well as we follow their story because of the things they encounter. And then at the end, there's something that they're going to be able to create that's meaningful and a meaningful change. So
yeah, no, that's absolutely the way it works, and it works in life this way, but it works in story that way. I'm sitting here thinking of down to Davy Jones the Pirate story. Early on in Act 1, Ricky encounters Jonah in the belly of the Kraken. That's a giant fish. It was a Kraken. But he encounters Jonah, and Jonah, in the conversation, basically sends into Ricky a new spirit. Okay, because the words kind of a call to action, Ricky accepts that new spirit, that maybe I can be something different than what I was before. And that's what inspiration is. You can be something different than what you were before. In romance, it's the introduction of the romantic partner. Because again, we suddenly go, "Ooh, I want to be aligned with that spirit," and that's what romance is. That's what marriage is. That's one of the reasons Scripture says the two become one. The male goes into the female, goes into. That's a physical act, but it's also a spiritual act. It's an emotional act, and that can't be separated. Once the two spirits are bound, they are bound. You can divorce, but we all know you can divorce, but that doesn't mean that the spirits are completely separated. There's always going to be some bond there, and that's what inspiration is when we receive in a new spirit, and because we've got that spirit, it's going to change what we produce at the end. So you mentioned about the action that comes from this. When that spirit comes in, we are going to produce an offspring of not necessarily a person, but there's going to be an action that comes from that, a consequence that wouldn't have been there before.
Right.
From that spirit.
Yeah.
So goals for the lead. What does she want? We've usually talked about it. What does she want? What's she willing to do to reach her goal? What will? So there's two questions. What is she willing to do? And then what will she do? That's two. Right. One is the old joke of the guy pushing the wheelbarrow off the tightrope over Niagara Falls, and he pushes it across, and then he looks at the crowd and says, "Think I can do it again? Think I'll go back the other way?" And everyone, "Oh yeah." So, all right, well, who's going to get in the wheelbarrow? Right. That's the willing, and what will you do? What's she willing to sacrifice? What happens if she fails?
Mhm.
So there's a sacrifice, what are you willing to sacrifice? And then what happens if you don't succeed? Once you put all those things in the voice of your character or the other characters and begin to ask those questions, then the reader is along for the ride.
Right.
And they are themselves answering that question and going, well, I wouldn't do that. Kind of like the romance thing. You're with the wrong guy. You're with the wrong guy. Break up with him.
That's good. That's really good.
So I'm going to put you on the spot, Diane. I'm going to ask you, knowing some of this, reveal heart, face obstacles, pick paths, make a discovery, reveal a secret, in your agenting career, in your how much you were passionately championing your authors over the years. How many times were you wounded because you put so much of yourself into authors and projects, but maybe you didn't succeed, you failed in certain areas? I mean, how did that impact you?
Well, I mean, it happened more than a handful of times. I never took on a story to represent a story, an author, unless I really loved the story and believed in it. So there were so many times that, to convince a publisher to take it on, I tend to like stories that are outside the box. I tend to like stories that are very realistic and that talk about women's issues, that talk about topics that people shy away from. So unfortunately, a lot of the stories I've championed and tried to get into print have not been typical material. But one of the best successes I've had is with our friend Cindy Sproles, whose writing was a little darker than the typical CBA market, the Christian Book Association market. And so it took a lot of phone calls and conversations with publishers. And everybody rejected those stories, but they were so redemptive. And finally, the publisher that Cindy landed with was Flegal, and Holy Spirit did that because the publisher came back and said, I just can't get the story out of my head. It's in my head. I'm living with it. I like it. We're going to take a chance. And it launched a whole genre for the Christian market, of heavier, darker stories of redemption that we've termed Appalachian fiction. But life is like that. It's not always pleasant. There are hard things that we have to go through. So long answer for you, but yes, it's been hard for me and my clients to get rejections for stories that are so worthy. So there's definitely a wound for me and my clients.
So what you just answered is you revealed heart, you faced obstacles, you had to pick paths, and then in the process, you made a discovery, and so did the publishing industry, that some of these books actually sell. There is a market for that. That's a discovery. I don't know that we've revealed a secret yet, other than if we could get into Cindy's head, we could figure out where did these stories come from. That would be one of her life experiences. Where did you come up with this stuff that's deep,
I remember making
well, listen, we've got
Cindy, what don't I know about you? I mean, did you go through something like this? And she said, no, it's totally just in my head. And I remember remarking, whoa, that's a scary head to be in. But yeah, we'll have to have her on here and interview her and talk about that internal imagination.
Yes, we will. Yes, we will. I typically throw out to the authors when I'm doing an appointment with them is after we ask what happens if your lead fails, then the question is your main character larger than life? Larger than life.
Mm.
And that's a question that for me it's kind of easy because I'm writing middle grade fiction, I'm writing humor, and my characters are always bigger than life. They might not be the brightest people in the world, but they're bigger than life. Um, but if your character is larger than life, then the reader is going to bond with it. And part of that, I think, is because we want to have heroes.
Yeah.
We want to have people who are willing to take risks, and we want to see them succeed because secretly we wish we could do that. And vicariously, we live through characters who are larger than life, who are willing to take risk. Um, and I'll close with this. I've kind of gotten fascinated recently with Winston Churchill and watching documentaries on Netflix and places like that of Churchill, because for a time he was larger than life. He was kind of what you said earlier. He was a guy that would not quit no matter what. He was either going to die fighting Nazi Germany and Hitler, or he was going to be victorious, but he wasn't going to surrender. And that's a larger than life individual. That's somebody who's motivated by a desire, and they're willing to be transparent and lose their heart in the process. So they're out there. Well, listen, I think this has been fun. I think we need to do more of this character development. So any parting closing comments or thoughts on character development that maybe we haven't covered so far?
Not just desire, oh, they have to be believable too. It actually has to be that the character could actually have the capability to succeed. So I wouldn't follow a character where the person was a little person, say 4 foot, and they wanted to be an NBA superstar. It's just not going to match up. Their desire isn't going to match with what their capability is. But so to me, it has to be believable circumstances, and so that's something maybe we could talk about how we develop that, how we take them. And I have a good example that I'll share next time when we talk fiction. That would be a great story for somebody to write.
Well, listen, Diana, this has been great. We'll chat next week and talk more about character development. Probably next week, we'll probably pick up and keep going with this.